It's January 31st, 1989. We are in Huntington Beach, California, a very desirable suburban city in the LA basin. Franklin UN is just coming home from his business. He's coming home from a hard day, long day at work.
Hey, sweetie, hold on. Let me put these boxes down.
He has a wife and 2 daughters who adore him.
Help me over here.
And now I'm gonna grab the briefcase with the car.
He returns out to the garage. The family hears a very loud noise.
What is going on in here? Dad! Oh my God, Franklin! Dad!
Her husband and father staggers back into the room covered in blood and collapses halfway into the kitchen, and half his body is still in the garage doorway.
Mom, go call someone!
The wife goes absolutely out of her mind and calls 911 and reports this as an accident.
My husband, he's not responding. Please, just hurry.
The first officer that arrives takes a look at this guy and realizes this is no accident.
Dispatch, I'm gonna have 1 male deceased. Go ahead and start me a medical examiner.
Huntington Beach is not a place where you'd expect to encounter violent crime, but crime knows no bounds, and violence knows no address. I spent my career closing murder cases, but I'm not the only one who answered the call. It takes a rare breed to solve the unsolvable, to catch a ruthless killer, to find justice for the dead. That's what it takes to be an American detective.
My name is Dale Mason. I'm a retired homicide detective. I retired after 30 years of service. As far as I was concerned, being assigned to homicide was the best job in the business. It was a Tuesday, and it was a regular work day for me.
Oh, babe, I think I'm gonna turn on in.
I worked a shift during the day.
The phone rings, and he instinctively knows who it is.
Mason.
It's not a friend. It's work.
Where?
You can feel it when they call.
It would always be someone that outranked you.
I'm on my way.
And it would always be a situation where you had to go from 0 to 60 immediately.
Well, looks like I gotta go to work.
When those calls come in, there is a certain urgency by the caller, and you're supposed to immediately go there, bail out of an aircraft at low altitude, and somehow resolve this before you hit the ground.
No one detective solves a homicide. It's a team effort. You have to draw on all the experience of anyone that's willing to help you.
Is Detective Hooper here yet?
Yeah, he's over in the garage.
When Mason arrives at the residence where this occurred, he's shown into the crime scene by a uniformed officer who points out the victim.
I recall that the victim was on the floor of the kitchen. He had what appeared to be a single gunshot wound to the chest.
So what do we know so far?
Married, a couple kids. Wife said he just got home from work.
He's a pharmacist by trade. He owns several drugstores in Carson, California, more of a working class, tough kind of neighborhood. But he lives in Huntington Beach and travels back and forth to work. One of the detectives assigned to the case by Mason is Detective Richard Hooper.
I think I got something.
Hooper has discovered the briefcase. Mason gets down on one knee and looks in this briefcase, and it's filled with cash. Now, that's interesting.
How much do you think's in there?
I don't know.
I was informed sometime later that there was $30,000 in cash in the briefcase.
Now, why is a pharmacist traveling around with 30 grand in his briefcase? He is a pharmacist, which means he can buy Schedule I narcotics. The question becomes, what is your work, Franklin? And what are you doing with this much cash? The other question is, why is it still there? Why not take the money? Well, the answer is they either don't know about the money or they panic after they shoot him.
You need evidence?
I have no idea who the suspect could be. It could be a neighbor, it could be the wife. It's a mistake to focus too soon on a particular suspect. So then you get tunnel vision and you start looking for evidence that tends to incriminate someone rather than just trying to find the truth.
Anything else interesting?
Not really. Haven't found any casings.
The fact that there are no shell casings told me the weapon used was a revolver.
Most people in 1989 had revolvers, where the casing is retained in the cylinder after the round has been fired.
I had a great opportunity to work with Detective Dale Mason. He is one of the best detectives dealing with homicide cases that I ever met in Orange County. Detective Mason will generally just eyeball the crime scene. After he accumulates enough information, he will start talking with individuals
Meet you back at the station.
that were actually at the crime scene.
First off, I want to tell you I'm sorry for your loss.
And Mason is careful when he approaches her. He doesn't want to alarm her or make her believe that somehow he is suspicious of her or even suspicious of her husband. He opens up with the standard line of questioning. So tell me about Franklin.
He's 43 years old. He's originally from China.
The victim had immigrated from China. He owned and operated at least 2 pharmacies in Los Angeles.
Of course, the 70s were really pivotal years, and during that time, we had a lot of immigration from Southeast Asia, for instance. A lot of those people came to California.
And he really liked Los Angeles, but we've just always been more comfortable living in Huntington Beach.
It was not unusual at all for families to live like in the suburban communities of Orange County and work in downtown Los Angeles.
She says he worked in a bad neighborhood filled with other immigrants, and they all loved him because they saw him as a brother. That he too was an immigrant to the United States, just like them.
He was a very kind individual that really wanted to help his community.
This crime, when it happened, must have been an absolute shock to the community because it would have been so unusual. He had a pharmacy up in the Carson area, and he was an important person in that community.
They weren't customers, they were his friends. Mr. Ewan allowed them to come to his location with a check, and he would cash it.
And it finally strikes Mason. It's the 31st of January. It's the end of the month. People get paid by the end of the month. He has that much money because he is prepared to cash people's checks.
He had a ton of cash on him all the time. That's when I convinced him to hire security guards.
He hired licensed security guards, but he didn't go through an agency. If you were licensed and matched a certain image and could be intimidating, I think he would hire you.
So he therefore would use them to protect him when he had that kind of money. When he would drive home, they were instructed to follow him to a certain exit. Then he would get off at that exit off the freeway and proceed to his house a short distance away, but they weren't permitted to follow him, so even they would know where he lived.
Victim didn't trust the security guards 100%.
So that gives Mason something to go on. Who are these people, and do they connect to this crime in some way?
Well, thank you for coming in.
Because he believes Mrs. Yuen is not part of this.
When I was assigned a homicide case, from the moment I got the phone call, I made up my mind right then and there. I was going to do everything legally possible to solve that murder.
Homicide investigation is not a sprint, it's a marathon. But the day continues, and it just continues as long as it needs to.
At 9:30 in the morning, I'm at the autopsy.
What do you have for me?
Pathologist ruled that it was a homicide, and the cause of death was a gunshot wound to the heart.
Looks like a 38 or a 357 Magnum.
This is a close contact gunshot wound because of stippling and tattooing. It's a phrase applied by medical examiners to describe burning and discoloration of the skin at the point of entry of a gunshot wound. The burning and the discoloration and bruising of the skin is a result of gas, flame, and unburned particles of powder exiting the muzzle of a gun when a bullet is fired. So someone is very close. The bullet size in those two are the same. The difference is the amount of propulsion.
Now that we had the bullet, if and when we found the murder weapon, we could do a comparison.
You mind if I use your phone?
There's certain characteristics of the bullet as it comes out of the gun that creates a unique look.
Mason tells Hooper to meet him over at Yuen's pharmacy to see what they can learn from his employees.
Okay.
I started to form the opinion early on, one, that the suspect was someone that had inside information.
We'd like to ask you a few questions about your boss.
I thought there was a high probability that one of the security guards was involved.
My name's Lester Hicks.
Lester Hicks is the security guard assigned to protect Franklin Yuen.
The guy you need to talk to is Danny Mosley.
He was very cooperative.
It's kind of his right-hand man the past few months.
Do you know where Mr. Mosley is right now?
No idea.
Lester says he just kind of disappeared. He didn't show up for work one day, and nobody's seen him since.
That dude was wild.
How so?
He talked about how you should rip Mr. Yuen off. He had all his money and
He said
stuff.
that this security guard had a plan to rob the victim.
Now, Mason's eyes and ears perk up when he hears that. Here's a guy, Lester Hicks, saying out loud that Danny Mosley, the long-term security guard, has mentioned robbing Franklin Yuen. No, that's interesting.
All right, Mr. Hicks, thanks.
Well, Mr. Mosley, why did you disappear? Putting your final touches on the plan to rob and kill Mr. Yuen? I think we better find out. Detective Mason's first step in trying to find Mosley is to run him through their systems.
I'm looking for some information on a Danny Mosley.
Well, that hits pay dirt almost immediately. Danny Mosley's in jail. So he's going to be awfully easy to locate. He's in a federal lockup facility in Los Angeles. Mason contacts the field office of the FBI. So what's up with Danny Mosley? And they explain that Danny Mosley is the leader of a stick-up crew. They are ambitious, they are busy, and they are dangerous.
About the date.
Mosley had been arrested for committing several robberies. We were able to confirm that Mosley was in custody on the night of the murder.
So now Mosley has a great alibi, but that doesn't mean he doesn't have a Confederate who robbed UN on his behalf.
See, I don't think he's gonna talk.
The FBI says Mosley's hardcore, and he won't talk to him, period, the end.
He's a real tough guy.
Mason says, yeah, I figured that, but I want to plant a seed with him and see if it grows.
I was hoping that we could shake Mosley up, make him nervous, and maybe get him to communicate with someone about any knowledge that he might have concerning the murder of our victim.
Who the hell are you? I ain't got nothing to say to you.
That's okay, Danny, because I just need you to listen.
Dale Mason is just very straightforward. You don't see him laughing and being jovial. He's just got this straight line approach, but it's very, very effective.
We told him that we knew that he was involved in the murder of our victim, and that sooner or later we'd be back to pick him up.
Guard!
Mason is aware that criminals are very evasive, easily frightened, and if you convince them that you know something, they're going to panic. So Mason waits. He knows it will happen because Mosley's got nothing else to do. He's in jail. Nothing to occupy his time except his own fear. It takes 2 weeks in Mosley's case. Two weeks before he calls anybody.
Hey, Mosley, what's happening?
Their calls are recorded. They are told that. So criminals believe, because they're smart guys, that they'll just speak in code and their friends will know what they mean.
No, I need you to do something for me.
And they're correct. Their friends know what it means. And so do the police, for heaven's sake.
No, I need you to do something for me.
My partner and I listened to all the telephone calls that were being made where Mosley was being housed.
I need you to get rid of my baby. You understand?
All right, I got you.
Mosley is talking to another male subject, and he's asking him to get rid of something.
Get rid of my baby.
But he's referring to this something as his baby.
All right, yeah.
All right.
Well, you don't get rid of babies, but you do get rid of objects.
It was obviously something he was trying to either destroy or conceal in some manner.
Now, what object could that be?
My guess, that's our weapon.
All they have is a phone number. They have no idea who Mosley was speaking with. They have a number that the person was called at.
I wonder if he ever visited Mosley in jail.
With visitation procedures, the person visiting has to document his or her name, an address, and a telephone number. When the call is made from the dormitory, the number being called is also documented.
Enjoy it. I think I got something here. Gerald Jennings.
So he goes to the logs, and there's the name and address of the guy he called.
That's cool.
Yeah.
He runs a background on this kid, and he's not what he thinks he should be.
He was a young man. He was a student at UCLA. He didn't have a criminal record. He'd never been arrested or anything like that. We obtained a search warrant. Once we were in place, I telephoned this individual and told him that I had been in the detention center with Mosley as a fellow inmate.
Oh, hey, man. It's Danny's friend again.
And that Mosley had asked me to contact him
I'm about to head your way.
to pick up his gun. I wasn't sure what he was going to do. I was hoping he would get the gun and leave the residence.
Mason's ploy works. Jennings panics when he gets that phone call and immediately leaves the house. And he's carrying something when he gets in the car.
Suspects on the move.
Put your hands where I can see them. Do it now. Step out slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them.
We stopped him,
Gerald Jennings, we have a search warrant for your car.
executed the search warrant.
You got him? Got him.
And we found the .357 Magnum in the car.
Mason is somewhat elated. Now he has a gun of the proper caliber in the hands of a known Confederate to Mosley. Is it the murder weapon? And is Jennings the killer? Well, we're going to have to see. Detective Dale Mason is on the hunt for the murderer of Franklin Ewan, a pharmacist with a young family from Huntington Beach, California. Mason takes Jennings to his headquarters and locks him in an interrogation room and personally carries the gun to ballistics for examination. So now he's proceeding quickly to answer both questions. Is it the gun and is it the guy?
I was very hopeful that we had recovered the gun that was used in the murder, but I needed ballistics experts to confirm that for me.
Y'all mind telling me what's going on?
Jennings initially wants to play bad guy.
I mean, you have no right to keep me.
He's saying all the bad guy things, but he doesn't mean it.
Well, you know you're not here for nothing.
He had a kind of a smug attitude, as though he was above it all.
We're investigating a murder.
Mason sees through the bravado to cover the fear.
I told him we were investigating the murder, and as far as I knew, the weapon that was taken out of his car was the weapon that was used in the murder.
If you don't cooperate, we're gonna bring you down for murder.
When I told him that I thought that he had possession of a gun that was used in the murder, that got his attention.
And now Jennings looks like he's going to have a coronary.
I'll be back.
And Mason gets up and leaves. He just wanders down to ballistics to see the good news.
Oh, hey. Bad news, I'm afraid.
You're kidding.
It's not your gun.
And it's not good news.
Are you absolutely sure?
Positive.
The gun didn't match. That just, in my mind, didn't diminish the odds that we would ever recover the weapon.
Homicide is always a series of problems. So now we got to go back to Jennings in the hope that maybe he can clear this up in some way. Jennings is frantic. He begins to just literally start running his mouth.
So how do you know Mosley?
I've known him since we were kids.
He and Mosley grew up in the same neighborhood.
When he called me from jail.
He tells Mason that he worked at not being a criminal, but he maintained a certain loyalty and friendship with Mosley.
I didn't shoot anybody. That gun never left my house.
And he's almost to the point of tears. And Mason sees a certain amount of honesty in that he's probably truthful, that he just kept it for Mosley.
I got nothing to do with this.
If you didn't use it to kill anyone, who did?
He was trying to tell us everything that he knew about the members of the robbery crew.
Danny ran with a bunch of guys. They didn't do just banks.
He told us that he was aware that the crew had robbed the Queen Mary and the credit union at the Long Beach Naval Shipyard.
Mosley told Jennings all about running this robbery crew and bragged to him about the crimes. Mosley trusted him as a lifelong friend. So then Cooper hits this kid with a $64 question.
This crew, this Mosley crew.
Got a name? Give us something.
There's this one guy,
He knew the names of some of the crew members.
Michael.
He told us about one in particular.
He had an Italian last name.
The subject had recently left California and returned to Cleveland, Ohio.
Benicio. Michael Benicio.
He said his name is Michael Benicio. He was part of that crew. He was in all the robberies.
See? Now that wasn't so hard, was it?
Can I go now?
Yes. Yes, you can.
I felt in my gut that we were headed in the right direction.
Mason is doing what all homicide detectives do. One foot in front of the other, one crumb to the next crumb. Where is that going to lead him? Mason knows it will lead me wherever it must.
I got a name I want to run by you. Michael Benicio? Is he in jail right now?
We learned that Michael, since returning to Cleveland, had been arrested for robbery.
Oh, he's out.
Benicio makes bond, but he's bonded by his parents who put up their house to get him out of jail. So he knows if he bails or runs, the parents lose their home. He's not going to do that. So he's going to stay in Cleveland, and they know where.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
I thought it was critical to get to Cleveland as soon as possible. Sometimes timing is everything. We needed to get to Michael while the door was open, while the opportunity was there.
Mason won't back off. He'll go to Cleveland, he'll go to Mars if he has to. It's time to confront Michael and find out what he knows. Mason and Hooper contact Benicio's attorney to see if he's willing to talk to them.
Now, this meeting is all contingent on my client.
To their surprise, Benicio's lawyer is very interested in cooperating.
We met Michael at his attorney's office. We learned that Michael was in Cleveland at the time of the murder. That was as good of an alibi as you can get. But I believe at the time that Michael wasn't directly involved in the murder of the victim.
Why don't you tell us about the crews you were running with in California?
Because Michael's looking at a significant sentence for robbery. He was hoping by helping us that he would get a reduced sentence.
Then I went back to Cleveland.
Michael was very personable, likable. He told us about being involved in this robbery crew.
We made a lot of money.
He says these guys are marching right along, making a lot of money, and Mosley's the brains.
Then he got arrested.
When Mosley gets arrested, the crew falls apart. They don't have a leader.
We were hoping you could shed some light on a murder that happened back in Huntington Beach.
I told Michael,
we think a 357 was involved.
We believe that a 357 Magnum was involved.
I had a gun like that.
Michael volunteered to me that he had owned a 357 Magnum when he was participating in this robbery crew in Southern California.
I gave it to a guy
Benicio tells them he didn't want to travel across state lines with that gun, so he gave it to a Confederate, a guy who was also a member of the stick-up crew, whose name was Willie Linton Hall. Mr. Hall told Benicio he would keep his gun for him until he returned from visiting his parents.
Willie's a bit crazy, you know?
Michael told me that Hall was the kind of person that can actually commit the murder.
Benicio says Hall probably did that murder because he's crazy enough to do that. And Mosley had talked to him about this pharmacist that always had a lot of money.
What makes you so sure Willie Hall's the guy?
One word. Money.
He goes on to say that Hall is probably worried, now that the crew has broken up, that his income is going away. So Hall probably struck out on his own using the gun provided to him by Mr. Benicio.
I can call him if you want.
Not yet.
At this point, I'm starting to feel that we're at a very critical junction in this investigation. The next few steps I make better be the right ones.
Dale Mason is a person that knows what he's doing. He has a plan. He's very methodical, very calculating, and thorough.
Superiors criticize me for being slow. Their criticism was of absolutely no importance to me. I was going to work the case my way.
Mason doesn't care about pleasing his bosses. All he wants is justice. Mason and his partner make their next move.
We developed a plan to have Michael released into our custody.
Mason and Hooper are putting themselves on the line with this because they're obligating themselves to a judge in Ohio that Mr. Benicio is not going to escape and that they will return him to Ohio when required.
We had the FBI, we had Michael's attorney, we had the local district attorney, that were all on the same page. And so the judge was very cooperative.
So off they go to California. The plan is for Benicio to call Hall and invite him out to lunch.
Hey, Willie. It's Benicio.
We wanted him to drive to a location that would take a considerable amount of time to get there so that he and Hall would have an opportunity to talk.
Detective Mason's a smart guy. He understands you don't just bring up a subject of a murder in 6 blocks. He tells him, pick a place that's several miles away so you have ample time to get around to Mr. UN.
Okay, I'll pick you up around noon.
So Benicio makes the call.
Don't forget the gun, huh?
Mr. Hall agrees to go all the way across town with Benicio to go have lunch.
We wired the car for sound and recording. We set up a major surveillance team. We had a lot of risk involved.
If something goes wrong, Hall could kill him right then and there. He's got a gun with him. It's Benicio's gun, but so what? It's still a gun.
Want to run through it one last time?
There is some preparation involved here.
The main thing is,
Detective Mason, in general, would talk to the individual about the parameters of how you can talk to him, what you could say and what you can't say or do.
Ready to do this?
And that it would be legal and upheld in a court of law.
Now, when Mason sets up this plan, does he know that Hall is the one, as Hall is the shooter? Maybe. The only guy that knows is Hall. And you're relying on a fellow criminal, Benicio, to elicit that information. It's another step by step, and Hall happens to be the next step. So off they go, and Benicio goes to Hall's apartment and picks him up. So they're in the car, Benicio and Hall.
Where the hell you been at?
Reliving old times.
Remember the run at the Navy Yard? We almost hit them cops on the way out.
As two buddies who also happen to be bandits.
Yeah, that one was close.
Benicio finally looks at Hall and says,
What happened to that guy? You know, the pharmacist?
hey, whatever happened to that, that pharmacist dude? The one that had all of the money. That mostly was his guard for a while.
Did you end up robbing him?
I tried to rob the dude. Dude wouldn't give me the briefcase. So, I blasted him.
And he says, yeah, I tried to rob him, but he wouldn't give me the briefcase, so I blasted the
Oh, my. Guess what? No more investigation. Now it's laser focus on Willie Linton Hall.
Did you end up robbing him?
So after this light conversation between bandits, Hall looked at him and smiled and said, I blasted that.
I blasted him.
So now Mr. Hall has just confessed to a murder on tape in front of a witness.
Hall goes into some detail. He talks about surveilling him.
I was watching him.
He tells Benicio his income is falling apart. There is no more work without Danny Mosley. So now what? And Hall remembers the pharmacist.
I knew we had the money, and I needed it.
Hall had the license plate number of the victim's car. He knew a police dispatcher.
Hey, girl.
So he went to her and told her a sob story about being the victim of a hit and run.
Yeah, I got the dude's license plate number.
He says he just wants to see this guy and settle it like men between he and this person and get his car fixed.
It's 4V.
Can she run a license plate for him?
056.
And give him the guy's address. And this woman agrees to it, believing his story, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
She provides him with registration information and the address of Franklin UN.
Hey, thank you.
I felt sorry for the dispatcher.
I'll talk to you later, all right?
She was a young woman, and she was fairly new on the job, and I felt like Hall had just taken advantage of her, and as a result, she ended up getting arrested and losing her job. When Hall's talking to Michael, he's like fun and games. He's jovial.
Oh, man.
Hall is proud of himself that he's so clever with this plan.
Yeah, that was good.
Detective Mason and Detective Hooper are listening to it in progress as it moves along. They're going to wait until they get every word they can out of this story before they stop that car. Hall tells Benicio that the night of the shooting, he drives to that house and finds no place to hide. So he decides that he has to climb a tree, which is almost something out of a cartoon, but that's what he does. And he waits for UN to come home. Ewan comes in the driveway, pulls into the garage. Hall drops out of the tree and goes into the garage to confront him.
Daddy!
Hey, sweetie, hold on. Let me put these boxes down.
Hall says that he confronted him in the garage,
Briefcase, hand it over.
demanded the briefcase.
When he confronts him,
Briefcase, I want it. Hand it over.
What do you want?
Give it to me.
Get out of my house.
something goes wrong. But Hall says, I panicked and I shot him.
God damn it.
What is going on in here?
Then I heard people inside, and I just ran. A typical armed robbery scenario. When panic happens, the gunfire tends to begin.
Dad! Franklin! Wake up! Mom, go call someone!
Did you get the money?
Nah, it just took off.
He kills him for nothing. He panics, he pulls the trigger, he ends Franklin Yuen's life, and he derives $0.00.
LAPD, keep your hands where we can see them. See your hands.
We called in LAPD, had him stop the car. We took Michael and Willie Hall into custody. That's the best feeling in the world. We just made our case. We got a suspect in custody.
Mr. Benicio is granted his deal and winds up doing 10 years in prison in Ohio. Mr. Hall is taken to trial for first-degree murder and given the overwhelming evidence in the case. The jury has no difficulty finding him guilty.
When you hear the defendant basically admitting why he did it, that's compelling. I think that went a large way towards the jury finding Willie Hall guilty. This is an aggravating crime because it's one where Mr. Hall had a gun going into the crime, trying to take money from an innocent individual at his home. And when the attempt to get the money was unsuccessful, in a way, gratuitously shot and killed Mr. Yuen. So this is a pretty aggravating crime of murder while in the commission of a robbery. And this certainly is an aggravating factor because of the callousness of the crime itself.
Once he was convicted, once he was in prison, that definitely was a day that people in the community were happy that he was no longer going to be able to terrorize anyone.
Franklin Yuen remains in the grave. What was his crime? He didn't have one. He was an innocent victim, living his life in the best way he thought he could, to take care of himself and his family.
It's a terrible thing for young kids to see or witness the death of one of their parents. I can't imagine they'll ever recover from that.
I would just extend my admiration and respect for the strength that they've carried out in living their life after losing their father.
One of the things I'm the most proud of is the Huntington Beach Police Department. A crime of this kind of magnitude, police would not stop until they solved it. They don't give up.
There are odd twists in these investigations. And then, as an investigator, you can find one tiny bit of information that gets you one step closer. It's what makes you tick. It's what gives you the energy to keep going.
Every homicide detective everywhere in the world, Detective Mason included, wade through quicksand that's waist deep for months and sometimes even years to find the Willie Linton Halls of the world, because no one else is going to.
Human beings are peculiar creatures. They will trade a man's life for the most absurd and pathetic reasons you can possibly imagine. Usually it is about money. Greed is a disease that rots the brain and hollows out the soul. I tell you, whenever you find a dead body in a confusing crime scene, follow the paper trail, and the truth will eventually reveal itself. It is a Wednesday evening in May 2020. A woman named Alicia Cordova is standing in her kitchen washing dishes, completely unaware that her entire universe is about to collapse. Her 5-year-old daughter comes running down the hallway, carrying a mobile device. The child and her brother had been on a video call with their father, a 40-year-old man named Nick Cordova. Nick was a good man, a family man, the kind of man who stepped up to raise his siblings when his own mother was struggling. He was a provider, working hard at the air conditioning business he co-owned in Gilbert, Arizona. But on that video call, the children heard a loud noise, and their father vanished from the screen. Alicia takes the device. She hears moaning. She hears yelling. She sees the chaotic blur of a struggle, a dark glove, a weapon. She is trapped miles away, helplessly listening to the murder of the man she loves. I have seen a lot of tragedy in my years on the homicide squad, but the sheer agony of a wife forced to witness the destruction of her family through a digital screen is a nightmare that commands absolute respect and demands absolute justice. Alicia speeds to her husband's office, her heart pounding out of her chest, only to be met by a sea of flashing lights and police tape. An officer delivers the words that sever her life into a before and an after, telling her that her husband is dead. But Alicia, even in the depths of her soul-crushing grief, has the sharp instincts of a woman who knows when the math does not add up. She immediately asks about Nick's business partner, a man named Dave Sweetman. She tells the police right then and there that Dave probably had something to do with this. My, you have to listen to the spouse. They know the rhythms of their partner's life, and they know when the music stops making sense. When the first officer approached the office door, he saw a man peeking through the blinds. It was Dave. Dave opened the door just enough to hand the officer a bloody gun by the barrel, claiming he was the partner. The officer had to push the door open, moving Nick's lifeless body out of the way. Nick had been shot in the back of the head. It was an execution. And where was Dave? Dave was pacing, acting hysterical, spinning a fairy tale about 2 Hispanic men in medical masks who came in trying to sell them refrigerant. Refrigerant. You have to be kidding me. You do not conduct a daytime armed robbery at a suburban air conditioning office over spare parts. Dave claimed the men pointed a gun at him, demanded all his money, hit him on the head, and knocked him unconscious. But criminals and those who associate with them are fundamentally stupid. They cannot help but leave a trail of their own incompetence. When the police patted Dave down, they found over $1,000 in cash in his front pocket. Dave stuttered, changing his story, saying he only gave the robbers the money from his right pocket, not his left. I tell you, if you are going to lie to a homicide detective, at least have the common courtesy to keep your lies straight. The surveillance video told a much colder truth. The cameras showed 2 men pulling up in an older red and silver Ford pickup truck. They wore bright shirts, gloves, and hard hats. They carried an empty box with a panel cut out to hide a firearm. The shooting happened off camera, but the audio captured Nick begging for help, fighting for his life, while Dave was absolutely silent. And then Nick ran into the lobby, where one of the masked men shot him from behind. But what the police report failed to highlight was what Dave was doing right before the killers arrived. The video showed Dave walking to the front door and peeking through the blinds, right as a red truck pulled into the parking lot. The anticipation of a coward. He was waiting for them. The motive was not some random robbery gone wrong. It was the oldest, dirtiest motive in the book. 6 months prior, Nick had discovered Dave draining tens of thousands of dollars from the company accounts. Nick told his wife he felt he was being watched. He told her he feared Dave would hire someone to kill him for the insurance money. And sure enough, just 5 days after Nick bled out on that office floor, Dave was texting the grieving widow, harassing her to sign documents to release an $8 million life insurance payout. $8 million. That is a lot of blood money. The local police department cleared Dave as a trigger man because he was not the one holding the weapon on the video. But murder is not always committed by the hand that pulls the trigger. Sometimes it is committed by the coward who unlocks the door and steps aside. The investigation stalled. Detectives were rotated out. 200 pages of the case file were blacked out with heavy redactions. A suspect was caught on a gas station security camera just 2 minutes down the road, buying fuel with cash, yet no arrest was ever made. They never even tested the ballistic evidence properly or shared the autopsy report with the widow. It is an insult to the badge and a disgrace to the victim. And if you dig deeper into the dirt of Dave's past, you find the mysterious death of his previous wife, Laura, 7 years earlier. A pattern of darkness follows this man like a shadow. Nick Cordova was a trusting soul who believed in hard work and the goodness of people, and he walked right into a trap set by a parasite. The killers may have worn masks, but the true face of this crime was hiding in plain sight, sitting at a desk 12 feet away, pretending to be a victim. Justice is sometimes delayed, and the system can be blind. But the truth does not wash away with time. It waits, and eventually, all secrets rise to the surface. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you could possibly imagine. Or sometimes, they simply leave a fellow human being to disappear into the dirt without a shred of compassion. And then they call it natural causes. My, I tell you, human indifference is often far more terrifying than the cruelty of the perpetrators themselves. You sit there in a warm office, wearing the badge, thinking you have a right to pass judgment on a person's life based on a few lazy assumptions. It is absolutely pathetic. This case began on the 1st of August, 2024, in the city of Fresno, California. They found the body of a 30-year-old man, completely naked, covered in dirt, lying at the bottom of a loading dock behind a waste management facility. His name was Spencer Irwin. Local police took one look at the scene and immediately jumped to a conclusion that was quick, convenient, and entirely wrong. They saw a naked man in a dark alley and assumed the usual story. A drug addict who destroyed himself, so desperate in his overdose that he had to strip off all his clothes before his final breath. They labeled it an overdose. No further investigation. No autopsy. They did not even bother to collect the physical evidence at the scene. It was a display of utter, sickening negligence. You have to be kidding me. But they were wrong. They had no idea that Spencer Irwin had a remarkable mother, Kelly Irwin, a brave and resilient woman who has been conducting the investigation that the men with the badges should have been doing all along. Spencer was not some nameless junkie from the streets, as they wanted to portray him just to close the file neatly. Spencer was a son, a boyfriend, a living, breathing human being struggling to climb out of the mire of life. Yes, he struggled with alcohol. He was battling addiction and was in a period of recurrence. But he was not a drug user. He medicated his depression and his pressures with beer or vodka at home by himself in a painful, solitary way, and he was always honest with his mother about it. Spencer was preparing to enter a rehab facility on the 29th of July, 2024, to turn his life around. He wanted to live. Our victim wanted to live. Folks. But someone or a series of cruel indifferences took that chance away from him. The nature of the law enforcement authorities, there gives me pause. When Kelly repeatedly pressed for an autopsy, the Fresno County Coroner's office refused point blank. They arrogantly believed their experience was enough to reach a conclusion without a forensic, pathologist's scalpel. They claimed they saw snow angel patterns in the dirt around Spencer's head and arms, proving he had thrashed about in a drug-induced frenzy. But when the toxicology results returned in late September 2024, the truth slapped him in the face. The alcohol level in Spencer's system was only 0.03, an incredibly low number. There was no methamphetamine, no heroin, no fentanyl, only trace amounts of a sedative and a nerve pain medication, completely below lethal thresholds. So, what killed this 30-year-old man in the scorching Fresno heat? They do not know, and they can never know now, because Spencer's body was cremated before the toxicology results were released, based on the authorities' false guidance that this was a routine overdose. In the end, they signed a death certificate with the cause, death by natural causes, specifically probable sudden cardiac death due to chronic alcohol and tobacco use. A convenient explanation for the lazy. If it was a natural cardiac event, why was he naked? Why was he at a remote loading dock, more than 4 miles away from his normal route? Those questions were swept under the dust of irresponsibility. One detective even heartlessly told Kelly that at least she no longer had to worry about her son. Relapsing. The sheer brutality in the soul of a person who carries a badge like that makes me sick. Look at Spencer's final steps to see the tragedy of a soul trying to save itself, and the shadow of the perpetrator lurking in the dark. On the 27th of July, 2024, Spencer walked 4 miles to a Verizon store to fix his phone, which he needed for his online classes at Fresno City College while he was in rehab. The store was closed. The next morning, Sunday, July 28th, he borrowed a phone from a friend named Angel Gonzalez to call his mother, saying he would walk to the store again before it got too hot. He walked out of his apartment around 8 in the morning with a black backpack, a black hat, jeans, a white shirt, and black shoes. That was the last time anyone saw Spencer alive. He never reached the Verizon store. He vanished in the thin air in the middle of the city. And when Kelly conducted her own investigation, she found bizarre details on the security footage of a business near the scene. At 10 o'clock at night on July 29th, 2024, a white Kia Soul, a very distinctive car with a boxy shape, drove in with its headlights turned off and quietly entered the loading dock area, where Spencer's body was later found. The car disappeared from the frame for less than 15 minutes, and then left the way it came. Immediately afterward, a lone figure appeared, standing in the dark in front of the building, before walking away in the opposite direction. The psychology of the perpetrator in this case is a portrait of cowardice and cold calculation. He knew Spencer was at his most vulnerable. He knew Spencer was attempting to detox, that his body was exhausted, and his mind was likely not sharp. Whether it was a robbery, a manslaughter due to a personal dispute, or some other malicious act, the perpetrator chose to discard Spencer like trash at the bottom of that remote loading dock. He removed the victim's clothing, or forced the victim to do so, to wipe away every fiber, every trace of DNA that might have been left on the fabric. He staged the scene to look like a drug addict stripping down in a hallucination to lead the authorities astray. And that cowardly calculation succeeded perfectly, thanks to the help of the Fresno police's own laziness. And look at Angel Gonzalez, the roommate who claimed to be Spencer's cousin. When Kelly asked the landlord to check on Spencer's apartment on July 31st because she hadn't heard from him, the landlord found Angel hiding in the bathroom. He casually lied, saying Spencer had checked into rehab and allowed him to stay there. But in reality, Angel and Spencer were supposed to check into the program together on the 29th. Why was he there? Why did he lend his phone to Spencer to call his mother and then occupy Spencer's apartment while his friend was lying cold at the bottom of a loading dock? The inconsistencies in this man's statements and actions are a massive red flag that any rookie detective should have spotted. Yet, the police remained indifferent. The grief of the mother, Kelly, is something I hold in absolute reverence. She went into every homeless encampment, knocked on every door of every business to ask for footage, and recovered her son's underwear from the bottom of that alley when the police ignored it. She did everything to reclaim her son's dignity, to prove that Spencer Irwin was not a name to be cast aside by society, but a human being who deserved the protection of justice. People can make mistakes. They can stumble and fall, but no one deserves to be left in a dark alley, stripped of their clothes, and treated like a meaningless statistic. Spencer passed away in total solitude under the scorching heat, but his spirit is still demanding a satisfying answer from those who turned a blind eye to his death. The truth may be buried under the ashes of cremation, but the mother's voice and the reality of a botched investigation will forever be a stinging indictment of the Fresno justice system. That is what happened, and I believe, though the mills of God grind slowly, they grind exceeding small. Humans are a peculiar species. They will build an entire life, a perfect, flawless facade, only to tear it all down for the most pathetic and selfish of reasons. I tell you, in my decades of looking into the dark and twisted corners of the human soul, I have seen brilliant minds completely trapped by the lowest forms of manipulation. This brings us to the tragic story of Laura Sweetman. Here you have a highly educated pediatric neurologist, a woman who dedicated her days to healing children, yet she spent her nights terrified of the man sleeping just down the hall. Let us go back to the beginning, back to the 1980s in sunny California. They were high school sweethearts. Laura was a bright and driven student, a swimmer, looking toward a future of endless possibilities, while David Sweetman was the varsity football player. It sounds like an American dream on the surface, but dreams have a nasty habit of turning into waking nightmares when you ignore the subtle warning signs. Laura went on to medical school, became a respected doctor, and brought 3 sons into the world. On paper, it was a picture-perfect existence. In reality, it was a psychological prison. David became a small business owner, but his true and most dedicated business was absolute control. He belittled her. He made a woman with an advanced medical degree feel incredibly small, insecure, and isolated from the world. That is exactly what abusers do. They do not always have to break your bones. They break your reality. They shatter your self-worth until you believe you deserve the cage they built for you. Laura lived in that dark and suffocating space until the spring of 2013, when she made a discovery that shattered the illusion completely. She went looking for answers and found out that David had an entirely secret life. He had a preschool-aged child with another woman. You have to be kidding me. You think you know the person sleeping next to you, the father of your children, and then you find out they are ghosts living a completely separate existence. That profound betrayal finally gave Laura the desperate strength she needed to walk away. She planned an escape while David was out of town at a wrestling tournament in New Mexico with 2 of their boys. She secured a rental house. She tried to vanish from his suffocating grip, but control is a powerful drug, and David was a desperate addict losing his supply. On April 21st, Laura ended up calling the authorities from a movie theater, terrified out of her mind, claiming David had held her hostage in their own home, grabbing her by the throat when she tried to leave, and threatening to end his own life. She had an audio recording of the terrifying struggle, 1 hour and 2 minutes long, capturing the sounds of her crying for help. And what did the justice system do with this terrified woman begging for protection? They dropped the charges due to insufficient evidence. My. The system is fundamentally designed to protect the vulnerable, but far too often it ends up protecting the predator, who knows exactly how to play the bureaucratic game. Laura managed to get an order of protection and full custody of her boys, but the looming shadow of fear never left her. She confided in her close friends that she was being followed. She was crumbling under financial stress, terrified of the mysterious debt David had accumulated through his shady business dealings. A diligent neighbor named Harry even called the police to report a suspicious white vehicle parked right in Laura's driveway, noting that the man inside cursed him out when approached. Did the local police department aggressively follow up on this critical piece of surveillance? Not at all. They took the note and simply tossed it into the void. A fatal mistake in a cascading series of failures. This brings us to the tragic morning of December 9th, a Monday. Laura did not show up for a vital shift at the Children's Hospital. A dedicated doctor does not simply miss work without a word. Her nanny used a key to enter the silent house. Detectives gently but firmly brought Willie in for questioning regarding a violation of his parole. The detectives used their exceptional communication skills, explaining the fascinating science of genetics to the young man. When Willie understood that science had placed him at the apartment, the weight of his secret became too heavy to bear. With a rush of emotion, he confessed. Willie explained that he had not acted alone. He had been directed by his uncle, 52-year-old Bobby Guillory. Willie, being young and feeling trapped by his circumstances, had followed his uncle on that fateful drive to Arlington. Willie detailed how they had staged the apartment to look like a gang-related incident, leaving the bandana and the bottles exactly as the detectives had smartly deduced. Chapter 6. Unmasking the Mastermind. The story took an astonishing turn when Willie revealed the true architect behind the tragic events. It was not a random act, nor was it a simple robbery. It was a plot orchestrated by Daphne Wright, the very spiritual advisor who had promised to save the family. Detectives learned that Daphne was functioning as a spiritual loan shark. When Chow and Hong could not pay the astronomical fees for her mystical services, Daphne's greed consumed her. Willie explained that Daphne had told his uncle Bobby that she wanted the couple gone so she could collect on the massive life insurance policies the family held. She had even provided the key to the apartment. The detectives traveled to the city of Katy to speak with Bobby Guillory. At first, the older man was hesitant, but the undeniable power of truth soon encouraged him to open up. Bobby, who had no prior criminal record, explained that he had been desperate and struggling to survive when Daphne approached him with the promise of $10,000. Bobby expressed deep remorse, shedding tears as he recounted the events, proving that even those who make terrible mistakes carry the heavy burden of a conscience. Bobby confirmed Daphne's role as the puppet master, but he also dropped a revelation that completely blindsided the seasoned investigators. When asked how Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment, Bobby stated that she had received it from none other than the son-in-law, Chow Tran. Chapter 7. The Power of Truth and Testimony. The investigation had now blossomed into a complex narrative of betrayal, greed, and the pursuit of money. The detectives approached Daphne Wright, a woman who projected an image of absolute control. When confronted with the evidence and the testimonies of the Guillory men, she remained obstinate, refusing to cooperate. A thorough search of her majestic Houston home revealed a hidden ledger, documenting the exorbitant fees she charged her clients for her supposed magical interventions. The ledger was a stunning testament to her manipulation of vulnerable people seeking hope. To secure a flawless victory for justice, the prosecutors made a strategic legal decision. They needed to fully expose Daphne's orchestrations. They approached Chow Tran, offering him a shield of immunity in exchange for his complete and honest testimony about the inner workings of the scheme. During the trial in the year 2019, the courtroom became a stage for education and revelation. Chow testified about the immense psychological control Daphne had exerted over the family. He spoke of the fear of her supposed curses and the overwhelming debt that had clouded their judgment. The defense attorneys masterfully debated the facts, pointing out the lack of traditional financial documentation and suggesting that Chow himself was the ultimate beneficiary of the insurance funds. It was a brilliant display of the American legal system at work, where every perspective is rigorously examined. Chapter 8, A Legacy of Light. In the peaceful month of September, the jury, representing the thoughtful voice of the community, reached their conclusion. Daphne Wright was found guilty of her primary role in the tragedy and was sentenced to spend the rest of her natural life in a secure facility, ensuring she could never again manipulate the hopes and fears of the vulnerable. While the legal outcome left some detectives feeling that the scales of justice were not perfectly balanced regarding Chao Tran's involvement, the overarching triumph was undeniable. The truth, which had hidden in the dark for so long, had finally been brought into the brilliant light of day. The story of the Arlington Police Department's unwavering dedication serves as an inspiring reminder that, no matter how complex the puzzle, patience and scientific brilliance will eventually reveal the picture. As the years move forward, the vibrant community of Arlington chooses to focus not on the shadows of the past, but on the bright, beautiful legacy left behind by Long Nguyen and Hong Lee. They are remembered not for the tragic end of their journey, but for the profound love they shared, the incredible business they built with their own hands, and the joyous, generous spirit they brought to their neighborhood. Their memory is a gentle, comforting beacon, reminding everyone that while greed and deception may temporarily disrupt our lives, it is love, community, and truth that ultimately endure forever. The city of Arlington, Texas, has always been a tapestry of woven dreams, a place where the wide-open skies of the United States promise a canvas large enough for anyone willing to paint their future with hard work and hope. In the year 2000, Long Nguyen and his beloved wife Hong Lee arrived under those boundless skies, carrying with them the rich, time-honored traditions of their homeland, Vietnam. They were a couple whose very presence radiated warmth. Long, a man in his 70s with a gentle smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, and Hong, whose kindness was a well-known comfort to everyone she met, did not come to rest. They came to build a legacy. They brought their 3 children and their deep, abiding love for family, ready to plant new roots in a community that welcomed them with open arms. Arlington in those days was blossoming into a vibrant hub of diverse cultures. The great wave of Vietnamese immigrants that began in the late 70s and continued through the 80s and 90s had transformed certain neighborhoods into bustling centers of commerce, culture, and culinary delight. Long and Hong studied the area carefully, realizing it was the perfect soil to nurture their ambitions. They were not merely seeking a quiet retirement. They were pursuing the grand American dream. With their life savings and a spirit of determination that inspired everyone around them, they established a commercial sewing business. The hum of sewing machines became the heartbeat of their new life. They enlisted the help of their family, most notably their 38-year-old son-in-law. Chao Tran, Chao, who spoke fluent English, became the charismatic face of the operation, negotiating with contractors and managing the day-to-day logistics. For nearly a decade, the Nguyen family thrived. Their sewing shop was a testament to dedication, eventually securing incredibly lucrative contracts, including an esteemed partnership with a global entertainment giant like Disney. They were a prominent, respected family. Neighbors waved to them in the mornings, and the local community looked up to their success as a shining example of what could be achieved through unity and perseverance. Yet, as the years rolled on toward the year 2011, the winds of fortune began to shift. The global economy fluctuated, the prestigious contracts slipped away, and the once thriving business faced an agonizing decline. In times of immense stress, when the modern world seemed to offer no solutions, many find solace in the ancient traditions of their ancestors. For thousands of years, Asian cultures have held a deep respect for spiritual advisors, seeking their wisdom to invite good fortune and ward off misfortune. It was an old-style mysticism, a belief in guardians of prosperity and protectors of the home. When a family faced a major crisis, whether it was financial ruin or a sudden string of bad luck, They would often turn to these traditional healers for guidance. It was a beautiful, deeply human desire to find hope in the unseen. Encouraged by his mother-in-law, Chow Tran scoured the local Vietnamese newspaper and found an advertisement that promised a return to prosperity. The advertisement belonged to a woman named Daphne Wright, a spiritual advisor residing 250 miles away in the bustling city of Houston. Daphne claimed she possessed a profound ability to lift curses and restore good fortune. Desperate to save the family business and protect the legacy they had built, Chow reached out to her. He traveled to Houston for a consultation, and Daphne performed a ritual. For a brief, shining moment, the family felt a surge of hope. They genuinely believed that the dark clouds were parting and that their hard-earned dream would be salvaged. However, hope placed in the wrong hands can sometimes lead down a perilous path. Instead of changing their fortunes for the better, the family unknowingly stepped into a complex web of financial exploitation. Daphne was not the benevolent guide they had imagined. She began charging exorbitant fees for her services, extending credit to the desperate family. The supposed spiritual healings did not bring customers back to the sewing machines, but they did amass a staggering debt. The family found themselves owing Daphne a sum somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000. The weight of this secret debt hung over the family until the morning of June 10th, 2012. At exactly 7:29 in the morning, emergency dispatchers in Arlington received a frantic, heartbreaking phone call. It was Chow Tran. His voice trembled with anxiety that transcended language barriers. He asked for a welfare check on his elderly in-laws. The dispatcher, a calm and steady professional, asked for the names. Chow spelled out his father-in-law's name letter by letter, explaining that Long was in his 70s. Chow explained that his teenage son had gone and knocked on his grandparents' door, but there had been no answer. The family had gathered outside the apartment, noticing an open window, an unusual sight that sent a chill down their spines. Something felt deeply wrong, but they were too terrified to cross the threshold. When Officer Weller received the dispatch, he responded with the swift dedication that characterized his 14 years of service. Welfare checks were a routine part of police work, but rarely did they occur this early in the morning, and rarely did they involve an entire family standing outside an apartment, paralyzed by worry. Upon arriving, Officer Weller stepped into the residence, his experienced eyes immediately scanning the environment. The apartment was in disarray, bearing the telltale signs of a frantic search or a burglary. Furniture was overturned. Compact discs were scattered across the floor. An unnatural silence permeated the air. He called out, his voice echoing off the walls, but received no answer. He methodically checked the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom. Everything was empty. The only room remaining was the primary bedroom. Entering the bedroom, Officer Weller was initially focused on finding the couple, hoping they had perhaps just gone out for a morning walk and forgotten a lockup. He turned to leave, thinking all was well, when his flashlight illuminated a series of smudges on the wall near a small closet. A heavy sense of dread settled in his chest. His instincts, honed by over a decade on the force, urged caution. Yet his duty propelled him forward. He opened the closet door and found Long and Hong. The discovery was profoundly tragic. The beloved couple, who had worked so hard to build a life of peace and prosperity, had been taken from the world in a manner that defied all reason. They had been bound, their breaths stolen away. The solemn stillness of the closet stood in stark contrast to the beautiful, vibrant lives they had lived. Officer Weller, a veteran who had seen the darkest corners of human nature, was left momentarily speechless. The shock was overwhelming. He stepped back out into the living room, gathering his composure before keying his radio to request a supervisor and a crime scene unit. When the homicide detectives arrived, including investigators with 21 years of experience, they were deeply moved by the tragic scene. The crime was shocking in its severity, especially considering the gentle nature of the victims. Who could possibly wish harm upon two sweet, hard-working elders who had never bothered anyone? As the detectives processed the scene, they noticed several peculiar details. It appeared a violent struggle had taken place near the front door, yet the living room contained bizarre artifacts that felt remarkably out of place. On the coffee table rested a plate with crushed prescription pills and a discarded marijuana cigarette. Most striking of all was a blue bandana wrapped deliberately around a beer bottle. It looked like a calling card, a dramatic signature left by a local street gang. Arlington did have active youth gangs known for extortion, and the color of the bandana was significant. Yet, to the seasoned detectives, the scene felt almost theatrical. It was too perfect, too deliberately arranged. Gang members rarely targeted innocent elderly couples in such a highly orchestrated manner, and they certainly did not usually leave their identifying colors perfectly displayed like props on a stage. The investigators theorized that the crime scene had been staged to mislead them. The detectives meticulously gathered every piece of evidence. They collected the blue bandana, the beer bottle, and the marijuana cigarette, sending them off to the laboratory in the hopes of extracting a genetic profile. They interviewed Chow Tran, who acted as the primary spokesperson for the grieving family. Chow appeared cooperative, providing a detailed timeline of the previous evening. He explained that the family had gathered to celebrate Long's birthday. They had eaten traditional food, laughed, and played cards until just past 10 o'clock at night. The elderly couple had received a ride home, and that was the last time they were seen alive. When asked about potential enemies or financial disputes, Chow maintained that they had none. The sewing business had struggled, he admitted, and they had even consulted a spiritual advisor to lift what they believed to be a curse. But there was no mention of the crippling debt. The detectives did discover that the couple possessed a substantial life insurance policy, valued at over $1 million, intended to keep the business afloat in the event of a tragedy. Chow and his wife were the primary beneficiaries. While this raised an investigative eyebrow, Chow's alibi for the night of the incident was rock solid, corroborated by multiple family members. The laboratory results returned, providing a glimmer of hope. A genetic profile was successfully extracted from a marijuana cigarette left at the scene. However, when compared against the national database, the Federal Bureau of Investigation's combined DNA index system, there was no match. The suspect was a ghost. It could have been an adult with no prior criminal record, or perhaps a minor whose genetic information had never been entered into the system. Despite swabbing dozens of individuals, conducting extensive neighborhood canvasses, and following every conceivable lead, the trail went cold. For over 3 years, the memories of Long and Hong lived on in the hearts of their community, while the detectives silently carried the weight of the unsolved mystery, refusing to surrender hope. Sometimes justice arrives in the most unexpected and gently humorous of ways. In October 2015, a rather bizarre incident occurred in Houston. A young man named Willie Guillory, who had recently turned 18, decided to steal a horse. It was an absurd, seemingly random act of youthful foolishness, but in the state of Texas, horse theft remains a serious felony. Because Willie was now legally an adult and had committed a felony, standard procedure dictated that his genetic profile be collected and entered into the national database. The database, a silent and tireless watchman, performed its automated search. Suddenly, a notification flashed across the screens of the Arlington Police Department. The profile of the Houston horse thief was a perfect, undeniable match to the genetic material left on the marijuana cigarette at the Arlington crime. Seen back in 2012, at the time of the tragic incident, Willie had been a mere 16 years old, a juvenile whose identity was shielded from the system. His reckless decision to steal a horse had inadvertently unraveled a 3-year-old murder mystery. The detectives could hardly believe the irony. A moment of light-hearted disbelief amidst a solemn investigation. On October 17th, 2015, detectives brought Willie Guillory into the station, officially arresting him for a minor parole violation to bring him into the interrogation room. Initially, Willie played the part of the tough, oblivious youth. He swore he had never been to Arlington, promising the officers he knew nothing about the incident. The seasoned detective, employing a masterful mix of patience and educational explanation, calmly detailed the indisputable science of genetic profiling. He explained exactly how the evidence worked and how it proved Willie was inside that apartment. The facade crumbled. The weight of the secret he had carried since childhood proved too much to bear. Willie broke down, tears streaming down his face, and confessed. He admitted he was there, but he insisted he did not act alone. He pointed the finger at his uncle, 52-year-old Bobby Guillory. Willie explained that his life circumstances had left him vulnerable, and when his uncle commanded him to travel 3 hours to Arlington to help with a job, he felt he had no choice. Willie's confession provided the missing pieces of the puzzle. He detailed the intricate plan his uncle had devised to stage the apartment to look like a gang. Related burglary. They scattered the compact discs, left the crushed pills, draped the blue bandana, and Willie, in a moment of teenage carelessness, had smoked a marijuana cigarette and left it behind. Willie revealed that his uncle had possessed a key to the apartment, allowing them to wait in the shadows. When Long and Hong returned from their joyous birthday celebration, the tragedy unfolded. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. The detectives asked Willie why he and his uncle would target 2 innocent strangers. Willie explained that it was not a random act of violence, but a contracted assignment. He revealed that his uncle was working on behalf of a woman named Daphne Wright. Willie had met Daphne through his uncle. He recounted how Daphne had demanded money from people who owed her, coldly stating that if they did not pay, she wanted them dealt with. The illusion of the gang burglary was shattered, replaced by the chilling reality of financial dispute orchestrated from afar. The detectives realized they were dealing with an inside job of devastating proportions. They immediately shifted their focus to Bobby Guillory, locating him in Katy, Texas. In December of 2015, Bobby, a man with no prior criminal history, was arrested. The presence of a search warrant for his genetic profile was enough to break his resolve. He confessed, his voice heavy with remorse, admitting he had been terrified the entire time. He explained that in 2011, he had been unemployed, desperate, and hungry. Daphne Wright, a woman he knew through a friend, recognized his vulnerability and offered him $10,000 to carry out her demands. Bobby described Daphne as a spiritual loan shark, a woman who manipulated the faith of others for immense financial gain. He confirmed that Long and Chow owed Daphne an astronomical sum, ballooning near $280,000. When the family could not pay, Daphne decided to collect on their life insurance policies. She was a mastermind, dictating every detail of the operation. But when the detectives asked Bobby how Daphne had acquired the key to the apartment, he dropped a bombshell that left the investigators reeling. He claimed the key came from Chow Tran. The investigation had come full circle, arriving back at the grieving son-in-law who had made the initial distress call. The detectives were blindsided. They had developed a relationship with Chow, checking on his well-being over the years, viewing him as a victim of a terrible tragedy. Now, he was implicated in the very conspiracy that claimed his family. Before confronting Chow, the authorities focused on capturing the mastermind. In August of 2016, detectives arrived at Daphne Wright's Houston home. She was a commanding presence, a woman who ruled her household with an iron will, her husband Howard appearing entirely subservient. When questioned, Daphne remained cold and evasive. She admitted to knowing Chow as a client and acknowledged the debt, casually remarking that people always pay what they owe. She refused to elaborate further, demanding legal representation. The police executed a search warrant on Daphne's residence, uncovering a trove of evidence. They found meticulous ledgers detailing her spiritual fees. She was charging desperate people $10, $20, $30, and even $40,000 for simple rituals. Her business was built on the exploitation of hope. She was arrested and taken into custody. Her reign of manipulation finally brought to an end. The final, most complex piece of the puzzle remained Chow Tran. Financial records subpoenaed by the police revealed that after receiving the insurance payout, Chow had not reopened the beloved family business. Instead, he had purchased a new home and seemingly moved on to secure a watertight case against Daphne Wright, the orchestrator of the entire scheme. Prosecutors faced a difficult moral dilemma. They needed insider testimony to definitively link Daphne to the financial motive and the hiring of the Guillories, in a move that highlighted the complex, sometimes painful reality of the justice system. Prosecutors offered Chow Tran immunity in exchange for his full testimony. In the safety of the courtroom, under the shield of immunity, Chow took the stand. He painted a picture of Daphne as a terrifying figure, a woman who wielded her supposed spiritual powers like a weapon. He claimed she blackmailed the family, threatening them with devastating curses if the debt was not paid. In a bizarre twist, Chow testified that it was actually his mother-in-law, Hong, who had bravely suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money and escape Daphne's wrath. It was a narrative that the seasoned detectives found entirely unbelievable, a desperate attempt by a complicit man to minimize his own guilt. The defense attorneys fiercely attacked Chow's credibility, pointing out the absolute lack of documentation for the massive debt and highlighting that Chow was the sole beneficiary of the $850,000 that eventually cleared. Despite the turbulent and contradictory testimonies, the jury listened carefully to the presentation of evidence. In September of 2019, after years of tireless investigation, the jury returned their verdict. They recognized the irrefutable evidence of Daphne Wright's orchestration of the plot. She was convicted and handed a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice, in its most resolute form, was served to the mastermind. Willie and Bobby Guillory also faced the consequences of their actions, the wheels of accountability turning steadily. Yet, for the dedicated detectives who had worked the case for 7 long years, the resolution carried a bittersweet taste. The fact that Chow Tran walked away completely free, protected by his immunity agreement, was a heavy burden to bear. The lead investigator, reflecting on the arduous journey, found solace in a profound philosophical belief. He knew that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, eventually finds the light. He believed that the universe has a way of balancing the scales, and that those who orchestrate harm will ultimately answer for their deeds, in this life or the next. The story of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee is not merely a tale of a tragic end. It is a powerful narrative about the vulnerability of the human spirit, the lengths to which people will go to protect their dreams, and the unwavering dedication of those who stand watch over society. It is a reminder of the beautiful, vibrant community in Arlington that continues to thrive, honoring the memory of the sweet, hard-working couple who journeyed across the world to build a life of love through the diligent work of law enforcement and a touch of ironic fate. In the form of a stolen horse, the darkness was pushed back, allowing the enduring light of justice and community resilience to shine brightly once more. Chapter 1. The Fabric of Hope. The morning sun over the city of Arlington, in the state of Texas, did not rise in a hurry. It crept slowly over the wide, flat horizons, painting the quiet suburban neighborhoods in warm shades of amber and gold. In this corner of the world, thousands of miles away from the emerald rice paddies of Vietnam, an elderly couple had built a sanctuary. Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu, spent their mornings listening to the gentle hum of the Texas breeze, a sound so different from the bustling streets of Saigon they had left behind in the year 2000. To understand the depth of their journey is to understand the heart of the American dream. When they first arrived in the United States, they carried very little in terms of material wealth. What they did possess, however, was an inexhaustible reservoir of determination, a deep love for their 3 children, and a mastery of the textile arts. Within a few years of their arrival, their small apartment was filled with the rhythmic, comforting click-clack of commercial sewing machines. They established a family business, transforming rolls of vibrant cloth into beautifully crafted garments. It was a true family endeavor. They enlisted the help of their son-in-law, Chow Tran, a young man of 38 years who possessed the gift of fluent English. Chow became the public face of the enterprise, navigating conversations with corporate contractors, shaking hands with suppliers, and translating the dreams of his in-laws into prosperous realities. For nearly a decade, the heavens seemed to smile upon their endeavors. The pinnacle of their success arrived when they secured a highly coveted, lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a global entertainment giant, none other than the legendary Disney brand. For a time, their workspace was a joyous world of colorful fabrics, laughter, and the bright promise of a legacy that would secure the future of their grandchildren. But economic tides are notoriously fickle. By the year 2011, the grand contract had concluded, and the gentle hum of the sewing machines began to quiet down. The steady stream of orders slowed to a trickle, and financial anxiety began to shadow the family home. In times of deep uncertainty, human beings often look backward to find a path forward. Long and Hong, raised in the ancient traditions of their homeland, turned their thoughts toward the spiritual realm. They believed in the delicate balance of luck, energy, and the protective deities who safeguard household prosperity. When traditional avenues failed, they wondered if a spiritual cloud, a silent curse, had settled over their business. Seeking a way to lift this perceived shadow, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law turned to the pages of a local Vietnamese newspaper. There, among the advertisements for community services and local markets, they found an entry for a spiritual advisor located 250 miles away in the coastal city of Houston. Her name was Daphne Wright. She promised to banish misfortune, dismantle spiritual obstacles, and restore the flow of abundance to those who had lost their way. Chapter 2, A Sudden Silence in the Morning. The date was June 10th, the year 2012. The clock on the wall showed exactly 7:29 in the morning when the tranquility of the Arlington Emergency Dispatch Center was interrupted by a phone call. Chow Tran was on the line, his voice thick with apprehension. He requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, explaining that they had not answered their phone, and that his teenage son, who had gone to knock on their door, was met only with silence. The family had gathered outside the apartment, noting with growing dread that a window to the residence was slightly open. Officer Weller was the first to arrive on the scene. As a seasoned officer with 14 years of dedicated service, he immediately noticed that the atmosphere was unusual. It was far too early in the morning for a typical welfare check, and the sight of an entire extended family waiting anxiously on the pavement suggested that something was profoundly wrong. Step by step, Officer Weller approached the apartment. The door was unlocked. Upon entering, the interior presented a scene of disarray. It bore the classic hallmarks of a burglary. Drawers were pulled open, compact discs were scattered across the floor, and the living room furniture was in a state of upheaval. Officer Weller called out into the quiet apartment, his voice echoing off the walls. There was no response. He systematically checked the kitchen, the living room, and the bathroom. Finding them completely empty, only the master bedroom remained. Inside the bedroom, the officer scanned the space with his flashlight. At first glance, the room appeared vacant, but as he turned to leave, the beam of his light caught a series of dark-hand smudges on the wall adjacent to a remarkably small closet. A heavy silence filled the room. Officer Weller hesitated, a quiet instinct urging him to pause. Yet duty prevailed. He reached out, grasped the handle, and opened the closet door. There, Bound together and hidden in the darkness of the small space were Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. They had been bound with silver duct tape, their heads wrapped completely. There were clear signs of blunt force trauma to their heads, likely inflicted by a heavy, metallic object. The shock of the discovery momentarily paralyzed a veteran officer. He walked out of the bedroom into the center of the living room, gathering his composure before finally speaking into his radio to summon a supervisor and the homicide unit. Chapter 3: The Puzzle of the Blue Bandana. Within the hour, the apartment was filled with forensic investigators and lead homicide detectives, including a veteran investigator with 21 years of experience in solving the city's most complex cases. Even for a seasoned detective, the sheer cruelty of the scene was difficult to comprehend. Long and Hong were gentle, hard-working souls who had spent their lives contributing to the community. They had no known enemies. On the coffee table in the living room, investigators discovered a curious collection of items. There was a plate containing crushed prescription medication, a discarded marijuana cigarette, and most notably, a light blue bandana wrapped carefully around an empty beer bottle. To the untrained eye, these items pointed directly toward a tragic burglary committed by a local street gang. Arlington was home to several active youth gangs known to use specific colors, including light blue, to mark their presence. Yet, the lead detective remained deeply skeptical. In his decades of investigating crimes, he had learned that sometimes a scene can appear too perfect. The placement of the bandana and the drug paraphernalia felt less like a chaotic robbery and more like a carefully staged performance designed to mislead the police. As a forensic team meticulously gathered hair fibers, latent fingerprints, and genetic material from a marijuana cigarette, the detectives turned their attention to the family. Chow Tran, acting as the primary spokesperson due to his strong command of the English language, provided the detectives with a detailed timeline of the previous evening. June 9th had been a celebration of Long Nguyen's birthday. The family had gathered for a joyful dinner, playing cards and sharing stories until approximately 10 o'clock in the evening. Afterward, another relative had driven the elderly couple back to their apartment. That was the last time they were seen alive. When asked about potential financial motives, Chow admitted that the family's sewing business had struggled significantly, but he claimed there was very little cash kept within the home. He expressed absolute bewilderment as to who would wish to harm his gentle in-laws. The mystery deepened a few days later when Detective Stewart received an unexpected phone call from a life insurance representative. The representative revealed that Long and Hong were covered by a highly substantial joint life insurance policy valued at $1 million. When the detective inquired about the named beneficiaries, one name stood out clearly: Chow Tran. Chapter 4: The Cold Trail and the Hidden Name. On June 13th, the year 2012, detectives invited Chow Tran to the station to discuss the insurance policy. Chow remained cooperative and calm. He explained that the policy had been established to safeguard the commercial sewing business, ensuring that if any tragedy befell the elders, the family would have the financial resources necessary to keep the business operational and support the grandchildren. Furthermore, Chow and the remaining family members possessed solid, mutually verified alibis for the entire night of the crime. They had been together, enjoying a family gathering far from the scene of the tragedy. The forensic laboratory processed the genetic material recovered from the marijuana cigarette, hoping to find a match within the federal database known as a combined DNA index system. However, the results returned negative. The genetic profile did not match any registered individuals, nor did it match any of the family members who had willingly provided samples. With no database matches and no immediate leads, the investigation slowly ground to a halt. The neighborhood returned to its quiet routines. The sewing machines remained silent. And for more than 3 years, the files on the deaths of Long Nguyen and Hong gathered dust in the archives of the Arlington Police Department. Then, In the autumn of the year 2015, a completely unrelated event in a neighboring county breathed new life into forgotten case. A 19-year-old young man named Willie Guillory was arrested in Houston for a felony offense involving the theft of a horse. Because a felony conviction requires the collection of a genetic profile for the federal database, Willie's genetic blueprint was entered into the system for the very first time. Within days, a computer system in Washington flagged a perfect match. The genetic material found on the discarded marijuana cigarette at the crime scene in Arlington, Texas, in the year 2012 belonged to Willie Guillory. At the time of the crime, Willie had been only 16 years old, which explained why his profile had never been in the adult database. Chapter 5, The Web of the Spiritual Advisor. On October 17th, the year 2015, investigators traveled to interview Willie Guillory. Confronted with the scientific certainty of his genetic profile being present inside the apartment, the young man broke down in tears and confessed. He revealed that he had not acted alone. He had been led to Arlington by his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory. Willie explained that his uncle had been approached by a prominent spiritual advisor in Houston, named Daphne Wright. According to Willie, Daphne was the orchestrator of the entire plan. She had reportedly claimed that the elderly couple owed her an astronomical sum of money, somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000, for spiritual rituals, curse-lifting ceremonies, and prosperity blessings performed over the previous year. When the family's business failed to recover, the debt had continued to grow. Daphne, unwilling to lose her investment, had learned of the substantial life insurance policies. She allegedly proposed a dark solution to recoup her funds, recruiting Bobby Guillory with the promise of a $10,000 payment to execute the deed. Armed with this astonishing revelation, detectives arrested Bobby Guillory on December 16th, the year 2015. Bobby, who had no prior criminal record, confessed to his involvement, confirming that Daphne Wright was indeed the mastermind who had coordinated the logistics, provided the keys to the apartment, and demanded the debt be settled at any cost. Yet a shocking question remained. How had Daphne obtained the key to the elderly couple's apartment? During his interrogation, Bobby looked directly at the detectives and uttered a name that sent a chill through the room. Chow Tran. Chapter 6, The Verdict of Time. The revelation of Chow Tran's potential involvement painted a far more complex picture of devotion, fear, and financial desperation. Investigators learned that the family had become deeply ensnared in Daphne's spiritual influence. They believed implicitly in her power to control fortunes and manipulate destiny. Chow claimed that his mother-in-law, Hong, had grown so desperate to save her family from bankruptcy and the spiritual wrath of the advisor that she had contemplated sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money to pay the staggering debt. While prosecutors harbored deep doubts about this narrative, they recognized that to secure a conviction against the primary instigator, Daphne Wright, they required Chow's detailed testimony. In exchange for his full cooperation and truthful testimony against Bobby, Willie, and Daphne, the state offered Chow immunity from prosecution. In August of the year 2019, the trial of Daphne Wright commenced. The courtroom was filled with quiet tension as the details of the spiritual business were laid bare. The prosecution presented ledger books seized from Daphne's residence, detailing extraordinary fees of tens of thousands of dollars charged to vulnerable clients seeking luck and blessings. Chow Tran took the stand, describing Daphne as an incredibly powerful, demanding figure who held an absolute psychological grip over his family's actions and decisions. The defense countered by arguing that Chow was the true beneficiary of the tragedy, pointing out that the insurance proceeds had gone directly into his bank accounts, enabling the purchase of a new home. Ultimately, after days of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty. Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory likewise faced the consequences of their actions under the law. Though the legal proceedings reached their formal conclusion, the detectives who had poured their lives into the case remained reflective. The memory of the gentle weavers, Long and Hong, who had crossed oceans in search of a peaceful life, lingered in the hearts of the community. Their journey stood as a poignant reminder of the enduring power of family, the tragic dangers of unchecked greed, and the relentless light of justice that, even after years of darkness, eventually finds its way into the deepest corners of the world. Chapter 1. The Promise of the Lone Star State. The sun always seemed to rise with peculiar warmth over Arlington, Texas. It was a sprawling city in Tarrant County, a place where the concrete highways stretched out like giant ribbons connecting a beautiful mosaic of different cultures. By the late 90s and the early 2000s, the city had become a sanctuary of hope for families from all over the world. Among them were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu. When they immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in the year 2000, they brought with them very little in the way of material wealth, but their hearts were overflowing with dreams. They possessed an enduring love for each other, a deep respect for their time-honored heritage, and an unwavering commitment to their 3 children and grandchildren. For them, the American dream was not about grand luxury. It was about building a safe harbor where their family could flourish. The Vietnamese community in Arlington was vibrant and tight-knit. The first wave of immigrants had arrived after 1975, following the fall of Saigon. Over the decades, they had built businesses, temples, churches, and neighborhoods that felt like home. Long and Hong chose Arlington because they saw a place where they could combine their traditional values with modern opportunities. They were a sweet, gentle couple. Neighbors often saw them walking hand in hand through their neighborhood, offering warm smiles and kind waves to everyone they passed. To build a legacy for their family, Long and Hong started a commercial sewing business. It was a modest enterprise at first, filled with a steady hum of sewing machines and the vibrant colors of fabrics. They enlisted the help of their son-in-law, Chow Tran, a 38-year-old man who spoke fluent English and possessed a natural knack for business. Chow became the public face of the company, the one who negotiated contracts, spoke with suppliers, and handled the daily interactions with corporate clients. For nearly a decade, their hard work paid off handsomely. The sewing business expanded, and they secured a lucrative contract to make garments for a commercial giant, producing beautiful items for major brands, including Disney. During these years, laughter filled their home, and the future seemed brighter than the Texas sky. Chapter 2. The Shadow of Misfortune. But life, much like the patterns on a woven fabric, has its twists and turns. By the year 2011, the family sewing business faced a severe downturn. The lucrative contract with Disney was lost, and a string of financial difficulties began to weigh heavily on the family. In traditional Vietnamese culture, when a family experiences a sudden run of bad luck, it is not uncommon to seek spiritual answers. For thousands of years, people have believed in the power of spiritual balance, seeking the blessings of the lucky god and the money protection god to bring peace and prosperity. When a family faces a major crisis, such as a business failure or personal distress, they often seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor to lift curses and restore harmony. Hoping to find a solution, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong, began searching through a local Vietnamese newspaper. They found an advertisement for a spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright, who operated out of Houston, located about 250 miles away. The advertisement claimed she could remove bad curses, bring good fortune, and protect families from negative energy. Encouraged by his family, Chow contacted Daphne and arranged a meeting at her home in Houston. He hoped that her rituals would turn their fortunes around. However, instead of finding relief, the family unknowingly stepped into a dark web of greed. Daphne Wright was not a healer. She was an opportunist who used spiritual manipulation to control her clients. Over the course of a year, as the sewing business continued to struggle, Daphne began charging exorbitant fees for her services. She ran up a massive tab on credit, claiming that more expensive rituals were required to lift the stubborn curse. The debt ballooned to a staggering sum between $250,000 and $280,000. Terrified of spiritual retribution and desperate to save their family, Long, Hong, and Chow continued to pour whatever money they had into Daphne's hands. Chapter 3. A Quiet Morning Broken. On the morning of June 10th, 2012, at 7:29 in the morning, the quiet of a Texas Sunday was broken. Emergency dispatchers received a call from Chow Tran. He sounded highly anxious, requesting a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. He explained that his family had gathered outside the apartment and noticed that a window was open, but no one was answering the door. Officer Weller, a dedicated member of the Arlington Police Department with 14 years of experience, was dispatched to the residence. When he arrived, he found the family standing outside, looking deeply concerned. The early hour and the palpable tension made it clear that this was not a routine welfare check. Upon entering the apartment, Officer Weller noticed signs of what appeared to be a burglary. The living room was in disarray, with compact discs scattered about and furniture moved. Officer Weller called out, but there was only silence. He checked the kitchen, the bathroom, and the living spaces, finding them empty. Finally, he entered the bedroom. Initially, the room seemed vacant, but as he turned to leave, his flashlight caught hand smudges on the wall next to a small closet. A deep instinct told him to hesitate, but his duty compelled him to open the door. Inside the closet, a tragic scene awaited him. Long and Hong had been bound with duct tape and were completely unresponsive. Officer Weller immediately stepped out to the living room, composed himself, and called for a supervisor and the crime scene unit. Chapter 4. The Tangled Web of Clues. Arlington homicide investigators, including Detective Stewart, a veteran with 21 years of experience, arrived at the scene. The physical evidence was puzzling. The apartment had been ransacked, suggesting a robbery. On the coffee table, investigators found a plate of crushed prescription pills and a marijuana cigarette. Additionally, a light blue bandana was wrapped around a beer bottle, a detail that initially pointed toward local gang activity, as light blue was a color associated with certain active Vietnamese youth gangs in the area. However, Detective Stewart was skeptical. The crime scene felt too staged, as if someone had deliberately left a trail of clues to mimic a gang-related robbery. As the investigation proceeded, detectives attended the autopsy at the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office. The findings were heartbreaking. The victims had suffered blunt force trauma to the head, but the actual cause of death was suffocation due to the extensive layers of duct tape wrapped around their faces. It was clear that the perpetrators had acted with deliberate, lethal intent. Shortly after the autopsy, Detective Stewart received a call from an insurance company. The detective learned that Long and Hong had a life insurance policy worth $1 million, and one of the primary beneficiaries was their son-in-law, Chow Tran. When questioned, Chow cooperated fully. He provided a detailed, airtight alibi for himself and his family, explaining that they had been celebrating his father-in-law's birthday until 10 o'clock the night, after which they went straight home. Investigators collected DNA and fingerprint samples from Chow and other family members, but none of them matched the evidence found at the scene, including the DNA recovered from the marijuana cigarette. The case eventually went cold for more than 2 years. Chapter 5. The Whispers of Time. For 2 years, the investigation remained at a standstill. Homicide detectives had interviewed more than 50 people, but no solid leads emerged. Then, in October 2015, a breakthrough occurred. A young man named Willie Guillory was arrested for stealing a horse in Houston. which is a felony in the state of Texas. Because of this felony conviction, his DNA profile was entered into the national database known as CODIS. Within days, the system flagged a match. Willie's DNA matched the DNA found on the marijuana cigarette left at the crime scene in Arlington back in 2012. At the time of the murders, Willie had been only 16 years old, which was why his profile was not previously in the system. On October 17, 2015, investigators brought Willie in for questioning. When confronted with the scientific evidence, the young man broke down and confessed. He revealed that he had not acted alone. He had been recruited by his uncle, Bobby Guillory. Chapter 6. Unmasking the Puppeteer. Willie explained that on June 9, 2012, his Uncle Bobby had driven him from Houston to Arlington. Bobby had been given a key to the apartment to stage a burglary. The plan, orchestrated by a spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright, was to make the crime look like a gang-related robbery to help Daphne collect on a massive debt. On December 16, 2015, detectives arrested 52-year-old Bobby Guillory in Katy, Texas, on 2 counts of capital murder. Faced with the evidence, Bobby also confessed. He explained that he had been laid off, was struggling financially, and had been promised $10,000 by Daphne to carry out the deed. Bobby confirmed that Daphne Wright was a mastermind behind the entire plot. When Chow and Hong could not pay the $280,000 debt they owed her, Daphne learned about their substantial life insurance policies. She pressured the family, suggesting that they could collect on the policies to settle their financial obligations. According to Bobby, Daphne obtained the key to the apartment directly from Chow Tran. Chapter 7. The Pursuit of Justice. With this crucial information, detectives obtained a search warrant for Daphne Wright's home in Houston. Inside, they discovered detailed financial ledgers showing that she charged clients tens of thousands of dollars for spiritual services. To secure a conviction against Daphne, prosecutors offered Chow Tran a plea deal of immunity in exchange for his full and honest testimony. Chow agreed to cooperate. On August 26, 2019, the trial of Daphne Wright began. Chow took the stand and described Daphne as a greedy, manipulative woman who used her spiritual influence to control his family. He claimed that he felt completely powerless under her psychological grip. The defense argued that Chow was a willing participant who wanted the insurance payout for himself, noting that there was no written documentation of the alleged $280,000 debt. However, the jury ultimately found the prosecution's case compelling. In September of 2019, Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby Guillory and Willie Guillory also faced justice for their roles in the conspiracy. While the legal resolution brought some closure, the memory of Long Nguyen and Hong remained a poignant reminder of the importance of community, vigilance, and the pursuit of truth. The dedicated efforts of the Arlington Police Department ensured that those who preyed on the vulnerable were held accountable, allowing community to heal and remember the sweet, hard-working couple for the love and warmth they brought to the Lone Star State. The morning sun of Texas has a way of rising with a sudden golden intensity, casting long and warm shadows across the pavement of Arlington. It was June 10, 2012, a day that began like many others in Tarrant County, with a gentle hum of early morning traffic and the sweet scent of blooming crepe myrtles carrying on the warm breeze. But beneath the quiet suburban surface, a deeply moving story of family, faith, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of justice was about to unfold. The gathering on the sidewalk. At exactly 7:29 in the morning, the Emergency Dispatch Center in Arlington received a call. The voice on the other end belonged to Chow Tran, a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant whose tone was thick with mixture confusion and growing worry. He was calling to request a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. The dispatcher, trained to remain calm and collected, listened carefully as Chow explained the situation in his earnest, accented English. "My dad's name is Long, last name Nguyen. He is 70-something right now. My family, my wife, my son, we want to check on them because they did not answer the phone. They saw the window was open, and everything inside seemed to have fallen down. We are too scared to go inside." To the responding officers, a welfare check early in the morning was somewhat unusual. Usually, such requests came later in the day, after hours of unanswered calls. Officer Weller, a dedicated veteran of the force with 14 years of experience, was dispatched to the apartment complex. When Weller arrived, he noticed a large group of people standing outside on the sidewalk. It was an entire extended family, their faces etched with anxiety. The sheer number of people waiting outside immediately signaled to Weller that this was not a routine call. The family members explained that they had knocked on the door, but received no response. Looking closer, they had noticed that one of the windows to the residence was slightly ajar, and the blinds were disrupted. Officer Weller approached the front door, his hand resting instinctively on his utility belt. He knocked loudly and announced his presence. "Arlington Police. Is anyone inside?" Only silence greeted him. Taking a deep breath, Weller opened the unlocked door and stepped into the apartment. The interior was in complete disarray, presenting the classic telltale signs of a burglary. Drawers were pulled out, items were scattered across the floor, and the living room appeared to have been thoroughly ransacked. Compact discs were strewn about, and furniture was pushed out of its normal placement. Weller moved cautiously through the space, calling out as he went. "Hello? Police officer. If anyone is here, please speak up." He checked the kitchen. Finding it empty, he looked into the bathroom, but there was no one there. The only remaining area was the master bedroom. Weller stepped inside. At first glance, the bedroom appeared empty as well. The officer stood in the center of the room, his flashlight beam sweeping across the unmade bed and the cluttered dresser. He began to turn around, thinking that perhaps the elderly couple had simply gone out for an early morning walk and that the apartment had been burglarized while they were away. He felt a brief wave of relief, hoping that the family outside would soon be reunited with their healthy, unharmed grandparents. But as he turned toward the doorway, his flashlight beam caught something on the wall next to a very small closet. There were faint, dark hand smudges on the plaster, as if someone had reached out to steady themselves in a moment of extreme distress. A sudden, heavy hesitation settled over Weller. Every instinct built over a decade of policing urged him to be cautious. He walked over to the small closet door and slowly pulled it open. What he discovered inside would stay with him for the rest of his career. Two elderly individuals, whom he recognized from descriptions as Long Nguyen and Hong Le, were inside the cramped space. They had been bound tightly with silver duct tape around their limbs, and their heads and mouths were heavily wrapped in the same material. There was no movement, no sound. Weller immediately checked for signs of life, but it was far too late. The scene was incredibly violent, with clear evidence of physical trauma. In that split second, the reality of the tragedy set in. Weller felt a wave of shock wash over him. He walked out of the bedroom, his mind racing, unable to speak or even use his radio immediately. He stood in the middle of the quiet living room for several long seconds, gathering his composure, before finally keying his microphone to call for supervisors and the crime scene unit. A legacy of hope and hard work. To understand the weight of this tragedy, one must look back to the year 2000, when Long Nguyen and Hong Le first arrived in the United States from Vietnam. Like thousands of their compatriots who had immigrated in waves since 1975, they brought with them very little in the way of material wealth, but an abundance of hope, determination, and deeply cherished cultural traditions. They chose to settle in Arlington, Texas, a vibrant city in Tarrant County, known for its diverse population and its welcoming, close-knit Vietnamese community. The area had become a haven for immigrant families throughout the 80s and late 90s, offering a supportive network where newcomers could establish businesses, preserve their heritage, and build a legacy for future generations. Long and Hong were the very definition of industrious. Soon after settling in Texas, they established a commercial sewing business. Because they spoke limited English, they enlisted the help of their son-in-law, Chow Tran, to manage the business affairs. Chow, who was energetic and spoke fluent English, became the public face of the enterprise, handling contracts, dealing with suppliers, and managing the day-to-day operations. For nearly a decade, the family business flourished. Through sheer dedication, long hours, and meticulous craftsmanship, they secured highly lucrative contracts, including a prestigious agreement to manufacture garments for a major commercial giant, producing merchandise for Disney. It was the realization of their American dream. They bought a comfortable home, supported their 3 children and grandchildren, and became respected, prominent figures within the local community. Neighbors knew them as a sweet, generous, and gentle couple who never bothered anyone, and were always ready to offer a helping hand. However, the tides of fortune can be fickle. By the year 2011, the national economy had shifted, and the family's business began to face severe challenges. They lost their major contract, and the steady stream of income slowed to a trickle. The sewing workshop, once filled with the rhythmic hum of sewing machines and the cheerful chatter of workers, grew quiet. As the financial pressure mounted, the family began to feel a deep sense of despair. In accordance with traditional beliefs carried over from their homeland, they did not view their misfortune as merely an economic downturn. They believed that a spiritual cloud, perhaps a curse or a misalignment of spiritual energies, had settled over their lives and their business. For generations, many families in their culture believed in spiritual guardians and the protection of ancestral blessings. When facing major life crises, such as impending bankruptcy, severe illness, or legal troubles, it was customary to seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor. These advisors were believed to possess the ability to perform rituals, offer prayers, and lift negative influences to restore harmony and prosperity. Desperate to save the business they had worked so hard to build, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Lu, began searching the local Vietnamese newspapers for help. It was there that they found an advertisement for a spiritual advisor based in Houston, approximately 250 miles away. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, claimed she could remove powerful curses and restore good fortune to those in need. With a glimmer of hope, Chow contacted Daphne and arranged to meet her at her home in Houston. The family was deeply encouraged by her promises, believing that she was the key to turning their fortunes around. They could not have foreseen that this search for a spiritual savior would set off a chain of events, culminating in an unimaginable tragedy. The investigation begins. Within hours of discovery, the apartment was transformed into a bustling command center. Detective Stewart, a veteran homicide investigator with 21 years of experience, arrived to take charge of the case, having seen some of the city's most challenging cases. Stewart was nonetheless struck by the sheer brutality of the crime. This is one of the worst scenes I've encountered in my over 2 decades in homicide, Stewart remarked to his team as they began their initial walkthrough. The physical evidence suggested a robbery. The living room was disorganized, items were scattered, and valuable electronics seemed to have been targeted. But several details caught the detective's attention, appearing almost too deliberate. On the coffee table sat a small plate containing crushed prescription pills, arranged as if someone had intended to consume them. Nearby, a partially smoked marijuana cigarette lay in an ashtray. Most striking of all was a light blue bandana carefully wrapped around an empty beer bottle left on the table. In Arlington, certain active youth groups and gangs were known to use specific colors, and a light blue bandana was a recognized symbol. At first glance, it appeared that gang members had broken into the home, committed the crime, and left their calling card to claim responsibility. However, Detective Stewart and his team remained skeptical. Sometimes, a crime scene looks a little too perfect, Stewart explained during a briefing. It was set up in a way that practically screamed gang activity. We began to theorize that the scene might have been staged to throw us off the track. To find answers, investigators turned to family. Because of the language barrier and the profound grief affecting the household, Chow Tran acted as the primary spokesperson. He met with Detective Stewart and explained that on the night of June 9th, the entire family had gathered to celebrate Long Wen's birthday. It had been a joyful occasion, filled with laughter and traditional food. According to Chow, the elderly couple had a wonderful time, staying at the party until approximately 10 o'clock in the evening. Another family member had kindly driven them back to their apartment, which was the last time anyone saw them alive. When asked if the couple kept large amounts of cash at home, Chow admitted that while some older immigrants preferred keeping their savings close at hand rather than trusting commercial banks, his in-laws did not have much money left due to the decline of the sewing business. He expressed absolute disbelief that anyone would want to harm them, describing them as peaceful people with no known enemies. On June 11th, 2012, the medical examiner completed the autopsies. The findings were deeply sobering. The victims had suffered significant blunt force trauma to their heads, likely inflicted by a heavy, flat object such as a hammer. However, the head injuries were not the primary cause of death. Hong Lee's face had been wrapped in 25 feet of heavy duct tape, and Long Wen's face had been wrapped in 10 feet of the same material. They had died of suffocation. The realization of the immense suffering the gentle couple had endured redoubled the detectives. Determination to find those responsible. A sudden revelation. While the forensic teams processed the apartment for fingerprints, hair fibers, and DNA, a routine notification shook up the direction of the investigation. Detective Stewart received a phone call from an insurance representative. It was standard procedure for insurance companies to contact law enforcement when a policyholder died under suspicious circumstances, particularly when the policy carried a significant value. In this case, the life insurance policies on Long Wen and Hong totaled more than $1 million. When Stewart inquired about the beneficiaries, the answer was unexpected. One of the primary beneficiaries was Chow Tran. On June 13, 2012, investigators invited Chow back to the police station to discuss the business finances and the insurance policies. Chow remained cooperative, explaining that the policies were established to ensure the commercial sewing business could survive and continue supporting the family if either of the elders pass away. Furthermore, Chow and the rest of the family provided consistent, matching alibis for the night of the murders. They explained that after the birthday celebration, they had returned to Chow's home, where they played card games and socialized well past midnight. Forensic analysts successfully extracted a clean DNA profile from the partially smoked marijuana cigarette found on the coffee table. They ran the profile through the national database, hoping for an immediate match that would identify the intruder. Unfortunately, the search yielded no results. The DNA did not match any of the family members, nor did it match any profiles in the federal database. It was a challenging moment for the team, Stewart recalled. When a DNA profile does not appear in the system, it often means the individual has no prior felony convictions, or they might be a minor whose records are not entered in the same manner. Without any new leads, the case gradually slowed. Investigators interviewed over 50 to 60 people, including neighbors, business associates, and community members, but no concrete suspects emerged. For 2 long years, the file remained on the shelf, a quiet testament to a dedicated search for answers that had temporarily run out of road. The thread unravels. The turning point came in October of 2015. More than 3 years after the tragedy, the Arlington Police Department received an automated notification from the state database. A fresh DNA profile had been entered into the system following a felony conviction, and it was a perfect match for the DNA recovered from a marijuana cigarette left at the crime scene. The profile belonged to Willie Guillory, a young man who had recently been convicted of felony involving the theft of a horse near Houston. Crucially, at the time of the murders in 2012, Willie had been only 16 years old because he was a minor with no prior felony record. His DNA had never been entered into the national database until his recent conviction as an adult. On October 17, 2015, officers located Willie Guillory and brought him to the Arlington Police Station. Initially, Willie was arrested on parole violation rather than a direct warrant for murder, allowing detectives to gauge his cooperation. During the interview, Detective Stewart gently presented the scientific reality of the DNA evidence. He explained how modern forensics worked and why the presence of his DNA on the cigarette inside the apartment placed him directly at the scene of the crime. Faced with the undeniable facts, the young man broke down, weeping openly. He confessed his involvement, but insisted he had not acted alone. Willie explained that in the summer of 2012, he was 16 and living under the care of his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory. According to Willie, his uncle had approached him and said they needed to travel up to Arlington to take care of a matter. Willie, feeling he had little choice but to follow his uncle's instructions, accompanied him on the 3-hour drive from Houston to Arlington on June 9, 2012. When they arrived at the apartment complex, Bobby produced a key to the residence. Their instructions, Willie claimed, were to enter the empty apartment, thoroughly search it, and intentionally stage the scene to look like a random gang burglary. They scattered items, left the blue bandana, the pills, and the beer bottle. Willie admitted that he had smoked a small portion of a marijuana cigarette and left it in the living room, unaware that this small action would eventually lead detectives back to him. While they were still inside the apartment, Long and Hong returned home. A struggle ensued near the front door. Bobby grabbed the elderly husband, incapacitating him with a heavy object, while Willie tried to prevent Hong from escaping or calling for help. Once the couple was subdued, Bobby used duct tape to secure them, and together they moved the victims into the bedroom closet before fleeing the scene. When Detective Stewart asked why they had targeted the specific couple, Willie revealed a crucial piece of the puzzle. He stated that the entire plot had been organized and funded by a woman named Daphne Wright, a friend of his Uncle Bobby. "My uncle met with Daphne at her office," Willie explained. "She told him that some people owed her a large amount of money and refused to pay. She said if they did not pay what they owed, she wanted them taken care of permanently. She promised my uncle $10,000 to do it, and she was the one who provided the key to the apartment." Connecting the dots, armed with this groundbreaking information, investigators immediately focused their attention on Daphne Wright. They discovered that Daphne operated a highly popular spiritual advising business in the Houston area. She was a prominent figure in her local community, married with 3 daughters, and known for her strong, direct personality. She offered a variety of spiritual services, including rituals to bring prosperity, heal relationships, and remove spiritual blockages. When detectives reached out to Chow Tran to ask if he was familiar with Daphne Wright, they noticed a sudden shift in his demeanor rather than cooperating directly as he had in the past. Chow immediately referred all questions to his legal counsel. This reaction heightened the investigators' suspicions that there was a deeper connection between the family's finances, the spiritual advisor, and the tragedy. On December 16, 2015, detectives traveled to Katy, Texas, to arrest 52-year-old Bobby Guillory. Facing 2 counts of capital murder, Bobby initially remained silent, but eventually chose to cooperate after being presented with the details of his nephew's confession. Bobby expressed deep remorse, claiming he was in a state of extreme financial desperation at the time, having been laid off from his job and facing the prospect of homelessness. He confirmed that Daphne Wright had approached him with the offer of $10,000 to collect a debt or eliminate the debtors. According to Bobby, Chow Tran and Hong Lu had become deeply involved with Daphne's services. Over the course of a year, as the commercial sewing business continued to struggle, Chow had repeatedly turned to Daphne for spiritual interventions. Instead of paying for each service up front, Daphne had extended a substantial line of credit to the family. Over time, the outstanding balance ballooned to an astronomical sum, estimated between $250,000 and $280,000. When Daphne demanded payment, the family simply did not have the funds. Knowing that the family held substantial life insurance policies, a plan was conceived to utilize those policies to resolve the massive debt. Most shocking of all was Bobby's allegation regarding the key to the apartment. When Detective Stewart asked Bobby how Daphne had obtained the key to the residence, Bobby replied without hesitation, "She told me she got it directly from Chow Tran."